The orc woman collapsed at the edge of Xavier Brennan's wheat field, just as the sun broke over the eastern hills, her green skin streaked with blood and dirt. One hand pressed against a wound in her side that seeped dark crimson between her thick fingers. Xavier had been walking the property line checking fence posts when he saw her fall, and for a long moment he simply stood there frozen, his hammer hanging loose in his grip. Because orcs meant trouble, and trouble was something he had come to this remote valley specifically to avoid. But then she lifted her head, and her amber eyes found his across the distance, and something in that gaze, not pleading exactly, but a kind of fierce resignation, made his feet move before his mind could catch up. He approached cautiously, the way he might approach an injured wolf, and as he drew closer he could see she was younger than he had first thought, maybe 20 or so, with the kind of strong features that her people valued and small tusks that curved up from her lower jaw. Her black hair was braided back in a warrior's style, and she wore leather armor that had been slashed through in several places. She watched him come with those steady amber eyes, her breathing shallow and quick. "Help or finish it," she said, her voice rough but clear. "Either way, I am done running." Xavier knelt down a few feet away, his eyes moving over her wounds. The one in her side was the worst, but she had cuts on her arms and a nasty gash across her left thigh. "Who is chasing you?" "Humans from the garrison town. They caught 3 of us raiding their supply wagons 3 nights back. They killed my brothers. I got away, but barely." She coughed and blood flecked her lips. "If I die, bury me on your land. Do not let them take my body back as a trophy." Xavier could not speak for a long time. The words sat in his throat like stones, because what she was asking was not a small thing. To bury an orc on his property was to claim some kind of connection to her, to mark himself as someone who did not see them as mere beasts. The garrison soldiers would not look kindly on that if they came searching. And yet he had not moved to this isolated valley, had not left behind the capital and his old life as a soldier himself, to become the kind of man who left wounded people to die in his fields. "I will do better than that," he said finally, and he set down his hammer and moved closer. "I will keep you from dying in the first place." She made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a gasp of pain. Bold words from a human. "I was a field medic before I was a farmer," Xavier said, and he carefully pulled her hand away from the wound in her side to get a better look. It was deep but clean, likely from a spear thrust. "I have stitched up worse than this. Can you walk if I help you? I walked this far, did I not?" "That is not an answer." "Yes," she said after a moment. "I think so." He got her to her feet with considerable effort. She was heavy with muscle and armor, and every movement made her breath hiss between her teeth, but once upright she proved steady enough. They made their way slowly across the field toward his farmhouse, a sturdy 2-room structure he had built himself over the course of the previous summer. His nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, which was exactly how he liked it, and it meant no one would see him bringing an orc into his home. Inside, he helped her onto his bed and then went to work gathering supplies. Clean water from the well, strips of cloth that had once been a spare shirt, a bottle of strong spirits he kept for occasions exactly like this, needle and thread. She watched him prepare everything with an expression he could not quite read. "What is your name?" he asked as he began cleaning the wound in her side. "Kreshka." She grunted when he pressed the spirit-soaked cloth into the gash. "Of the Broken Blade clan, or I was. I expect they will have cast me out by now for failing the raid and losing my brothers. Xavier Brennan. No clan, just a farmer." He threaded the needle with steady hands, muscle memory from his years in the army taking over. "This is going to hurt." "Everything hurts. Go on." He stitched the wound closed with careful precision, and to her credit, Kreshka made no sound beyond the occasional sharp intake of breath. When he finished with her side, he moved on to her other injuries, cleaning and bandaging each one. The gash on her thigh required more stitches. By the time he was done, the morning sun was streaming through the window and his hands were stained pink with diluted blood. "You should rest," Xavier said, standing up and stretching his back. "I will make something to eat." "Why are you doing this?" Kreshka asked. She was looking at him with something like suspicion now, as if kindness was more frightening than cruelty. "You said you were a soldier. You must have fought my kind before." "I have." Xavier moved to the small kitchen area and began pulling out ingredients for a simple stew. "I fought in the border campaigns for 5 years. I saw friends die to orc axes and friends do worse to captured orcs. I saw what fear and hatred do to people on both sides." He paused, his hands stilling on the cutting board. "When my term of service ended, I took my pay and came here. I wanted land that was mine, work that did not involve killing, and some peace. I did not come all this way to start killing again." "A soldier who got tired of war," Kreshka said softly. "We have those too. They usually do not live very long. My people do not forgive weakness." "Is mercy weakness?" "My chieftain would say so." Xavier started chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. "Then perhaps your chieftain is a fool." He thought she might take offense, but instead she made that sound again that might have been a laugh. "Perhaps." She slept most of that day and through the night, her body working to heal itself with the resilience he had heard orcs possessed. Xavier made up a bedroll for himself on the floor and tried not to think too hard about the fact that he had an orc warrior sleeping in his bed while human soldiers might be searching the area. He had made his choice. He would live with the consequences. The next morning Kreshka was awake when he rose, sitting up against the wall with the blanket pulled around her shoulders. The green of her skin looked healthier in the morning light, less gray around the edges. "You have no woman?" she asked as he built up the fire. "No. No family at all." "Not anymore. My parents died of fever when I was young. My sister married a merchant and moved to the southern provinces. We exchanged letters twice a year." He set a pot of water to boil. "What about you? Besides your brothers who died, I mean." "My mother lives still, though she has not spoken to me in 2 years. We disagreed about whether I should take the warrior path. She wanted me to stay in the clan holds and raise children." Kreshka shifted, wincing. "My father died in battle when I was small. I barely remember him." "I am sorry." "Why, you did not kill him." "I am sorry you lost him. One does not need to be responsible for a loss to feel sympathy about it." Kreshka was quiet for a moment, her amber eyes studying him. "You are strange for a human." "I get that a lot." Over the following days, Xavier fell into a strange new routine. He would rise early to tend his animals and work the farm, then return to check on Kreshka and bring her food. She was a difficult patient, restless and unused to inactivity, but her wounds kept her from doing much more than sitting up and occasionally hobbling to the door to look out at the valley. He had moved her to the chair after the first day so he could reclaim his bed, though he found he slept poorly knowing she was just a few feet away. On the 4th day, she was standing when he came in from the fields, her hand braced against the wall but her weight on her own feet. "You should not be up," Xavier said, dropping his work gloves on the table. "I should not be here at all, lying about like an invalid." Her jaw was set with determination. "My wounds are closing. I need to regain my strength." "By tearing your stitches. Brilliant plan." "I will go mad if I sit in that chair another day." Xavier sighed and moved to support her elbow. "Fine. But we do this slowly. Walk to the door and back. If you can manage that without bleeding, we can try more tomorrow." She made it to the door, her steps careful and measured, and stood looking out at his land. The wheat was coming in golden and beautiful, and beyond the fields the hills rolled away green and endless under the summer sky. "It is peaceful here," Kreshka said quietly. "I see why you came." "It has its moments." Xavier stood beside her, close enough to catch her if she fell but trying not to hover. "Though it gets lonely sometimes, loneliness is better than hatred." "Is it?" She glanced at him, something shifting in her expression. "I do not know any more." They made the walk back to the chair together, and Xavier pretended not to notice how she leaned on him more heavily than she had on the way to the door. That evening he made a proper dinner. Roasted chicken and potatoes and bread he had baked the day before, and they ate together at his small table. It felt almost normal if he ignored the fact that she was an orc, and he was a human, and everything about this situation was deeply strange. "Tell me about your farm," Kreshka said as she tore into the bread with her strong teeth. "How long have you been here?" "2 years. I bought the land cheap because it was undeveloped and far from everything. Spent the first year building the house and barn and clearing fields. Last year I got the wheat in and made enough to pay for seed and supplies for this year. If the harvest is good, I will finally turn a real profit." He took a drink of water. "It is not exciting, but it is mine." "Land is worth fighting for," Kreshka said. "My people fight over territory constantly. Clans raiding other clans, pushing into human settlements, being pushed back." She set down the bread. "I thought I was fighting for something important, for my people's survival. But after my brothers died and I was running through the forest with an arrow in my side, I wondered if we are just fighting because it is all we know how to do." "War has a way of feeding itself," Xavier said. "The humans fear the orcs, so they attack. The orcs retaliate. More fear, more attacks. It goes around and around until everyone forgets how it started. How do you stop it?" "I do not know if you can, not on a large scale, but maybe person by person, moment by moment, you can choose something different." He met her eyes. "Like right now." "You mean you not killing me when you found me?" "I mean both of us. Me helping you. You trusting me enough to stay and heal instead of running." Xavier leaned back in his chair. "It is not much. It will not change the world, but it is something." Kreshka was quiet for a long time, her gaze distant. "My brothers would call me a traitor for being here, for accepting help from a human. What would you call it? Survival, or maybe the beginning of something else? I am not certain yet." On the 6th day, a rider came down the road. Xavier spotted the dust from his position in the north field and felt his stomach drop. He hurried back to the house, where Kreshka was now able to move around with relative ease, and found her already standing at the window with tension in every line of her body. "You saw?" Xavier asked. "I saw." "Garrison soldier by the look of him. Get in the cellar. There is a storage space under the kitchen floorboards. It will be cramped, but he will not find you there." Kreshka did not move. "If they search and find me, you will be arrested for harboring an enemy. Then we will make sure they do not search. Go. Now." She went, moving with impressive speed despite her healing injuries, and Xavier pulled up the floorboards to reveal the small space beneath. It was meant for storing root vegetables, but it would hold a person if they curled up tight. Kreshka climbed down without a word, and Xavier replaced the boards, then threw a rug over the area for good measure. By the time the rider reached the house, Xavier was outside leaning against the fence post with his arms crossed, the picture of a farmer annoyed at being interrupted. The soldier was young, maybe 25, with the garrison badge on his shoulder and a sword at his hip. "Afternoon," he called as he dismounted. "Xavier Brennan." "That is right. What can I do for you? Captain Marcus sent me to ask if you have seen any orcs in the area." "We have been tracking a wounded raider for almost a week now. Lost the trail a few days back, but we know she came this direction." Xavier kept his expression neutral. "I have not seen any orcs, Just me and my wheat out here." The soldier looked around with sharp eyes, taking in the barn and the fields and the house. "You mind if I look around, just to be thorough?" "I do mind, actually. This is private property and I am not inclined to have soldiers tramping through my home on the off chance you might find something." Xavier straightened up, letting some of his old military bearing show through. "I served my 5 years in the border campaigns, did my duty, came out here for peace and quiet. If I see an orc, I will send word to the garrison. Until then, I would appreciate being left alone." The soldier studied him for a moment, clearly trying to decide if it was worth pushing. Finally, he nodded. "Fair enough, but keep your eyes open. This one killed 2 of our men before she ran. She is dangerous." "I am sure she is. I will be careful." The soldier mounted up and rode off, and Xavier stood there until he was out of sight before returning to the house. He pulled up the floorboards and helped Kreshka climb out. Her face was tight with something he could not quite name. "You lied for me," she said. "I did." "You could hang for that." "Probably not. But I could lose my land and end up in a garrison prison for a few years." Xavier replaced the floorboards carefully. "Seemed worth the risk." "Why?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and realized he had been avoiding asking himself that question. "Because the alternative was watching them drag you away to be executed as a trophy. Because you trusted me enough to stay when you could have run. Because somewhere in the last 6 days you stopped being an orc in my house and became just Kreshka." He paused. "Is that reason enough? I do not know. Is it? For me it is. Something changed between them after that. The wariness that had lingered in their interactions dissolved, replaced by something warmer and more complicated. Kreshka began helping around the house as her strength returned, insisting that she could not simply lie about when there was work to be done. Xavier taught her how to knead bread dough, and she taught him some orc traveling songs in her language, her voice surprisingly melodic. In the evenings they would sit outside and watch the sun set over the hills, talking about everything and nothing. "What is the worst thing you did in the war?" Kreshka asked one evening, 3 weeks after she had arrived. Xavier was quiet for a long time. "We raided an orc settlement that intelligence said was a staging ground for attacks. Turned out it was mostly families, elders and children. We realized the mistake too late." He stared at his hands. "I tried to stop it. Got a broken jaw for my trouble. Ended up pulling as many people as I could into a storage building and guarding the door until my captain called the retreat. Saved maybe a dozen. But I can still hear the screaming from the parts of the camp I could not reach." Kreshka was silent beside him. "What about you?" Xavier asked. "What is the worst thing you have done?" "The raid where my brothers died, we burned a human farmhouse. The family got out, but everything they owned was inside. We took their livestock and left them with nothing." She drew her knees up to her chest. "I told myself it was necessary, that humans had done worse to my people. But I saw the woman's face as we rode away, and I knew I had just made another person hate orcs with good reason." "We are quite a pair," Xavier said. "Yes, we are." "Do you regret staying? Being here instead of going back to your clan?" Kreshka turned to look at him, the evening light catching in her amber eyes. "No, but I think I am in danger of regretting having to leave when I am healed." His heart did something complicated in his chest. "You could stay." "Xavier, I mean it, stay, help me run the farm, we could make it work. People would talk. The garrison would investigate. Let them talk. Let them investigate. We are not doing anything wrong. We are an orc and a human living together. Many would say that is wrong by definition." "Many are idiots." Xavier shifted to face her fully. "I know this is complicated. I know there are 100 reasons why it is a bad idea, but I have not been this happy in years, and I do not think you have been either. Surely that counts for something." Kreshka reached out and took his hand, her grip strong and warm. It counts for everything. But I need you to understand what you are asking. If I stay, you will be marked. Humans will call you an orc lover. They will spit when you come to town. Your life will become much harder. My life has been hard before. I can handle it. And if my clan comes looking for me, if they decide I am a traitor and need to be dealt with, then we will deal with that together. She laughed, but there were tears in her eyes. You are either the bravest man I have ever met or the most foolish. Can I be both? Yes, you absolutely can be both. She squeezed his hand. I will stay, for as long as you will have me. Good, Xavier said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. The harvest came in golden and plentiful, and Kreshka worked beside Xavier from dawn until dusk, cutting wheat and bundling sheaves. She was stronger than him by a considerable margin, able to lift bundles he had to drag, and her endurance was seemingly endless. With her help, they finished the harvest in half the time it would have taken him alone. They celebrated that night with a meal of roasted vegetables and the last of his stored wine, and when she smiled at him across the table with grain dust still caught in her dark hair, he knew he was in serious trouble. I need to go into town tomorrow to sell the wheat, Xavier said as they cleaned up. You should stay here. Kreshka's expression shuddered. You are ashamed to be seen with me. No, I am worried someone will recognize you from the garrison search. I am worried they will arrest you or worse. He dried a plate with more force than necessary. I am trying to keep you safe. I have been safe before. It is lonely and dull, Kreshka. Take me with you. Let me see how humans react. If it is too dangerous, I will stay behind next time, but I cannot hide in this house forever wondering. He wanted to argue, but he could see the determination in her face and knew it would be pointless. Fine, but stay close to me and let me do the talking. They set out early the next morning with the wagon loaded with wheat. The journey to town took 3 hours, and Xavier spent most of it worrying about everything that could go wrong. But when they finally rolled into the small market town of Milford, nothing dramatic happened. People stared, certainly. Some pointed and whispered. But no one drew weapons or called for the garrison. They sold the wheat to the mill master, a gruff older man named Thomas who eyed Kreshka with obvious suspicion, but said nothing beyond agreeing on a fair price. Xavier took the money and then made stops at the general store for supplies. The shopkeeper, a middle-aged woman named Helen, was less restrained. You have an orc, she said flatly as they entered. I do. Her name is Kreshka. She is helping me run the farm. Helen looked Kreshka up and down. Helping, is that what we are calling it now? We are calling it exactly what it is, Xavier said calmly. She is a good worker and a good person. Now I need flour, salt, sugar, and lamp oil. Helen gathered the supplies with obvious reluctance, her mouth pressed into a thin line. As she tallied up the cost, she said, People are going to talk, Xavier. They already are talking. Let them talk. Some of them will do more than talk. There are folks in this town who lost family to orc raids. They are not going to take kindly to you bringing one into our community. Then it is fortunate I do not live in town, Xavier said, paying her and gathering up his purchases. Good day, Helen. Outside, Kreshka was quiet as they loaded the supplies into the wagon. She is not wrong, she said finally. People here have reasons to hate my kind. And I have reasons to care about you. One does not erase the other, but it also does not mean I am going to hide you away like something shameful. Xavier climbed up onto the wagon seat. Come on, let us go home. The word home settled between them with unexpected weight, and Kreshka climbed up beside him without another word. Summer faded into autumn, and the farm work shifted from harvesting to preparation for winter. Xavier spent his days chopping firewood and repairing the barn roof, while Kreshka proved surprisingly skilled at preserving food and organizing storage. They worked together with an easy rhythm that felt like it had always existed, and at night they would sit by the fire and read from Xavier's small collection of books, or simply talk about their days. "You miss your clan?" Xavier asked one evening as the first real cold snap settled over the valley. Kreshka set down the shirt she was mending. "I miss some things. The feeling of belonging to something larger than myself. The songs around the campfire. My mother's laugh from before we fought." She paused. "But I do not miss the constant preparing for battle, the anger that fueled everything we did, the way anyone who suggested peace was mocked as weak. Do you think peace is possible? Between humans and orcs, I mean. I think it is possible in small ways, in individual choices." She looked at him. "Like us." "Like us," Xavier agreed. Winter arrived with unexpected ferocity, bringing heavy snows that blocked the road and turned the valley into a pristine white landscape. Xavier and Kreshka found themselves snowed in for days at a time, dependent entirely on each other for company and survival. It should have been uncomfortable, living in such close quarters, but instead, Xavier found he cherished it. They cooked together, mended equipment together, and on particularly cold nights they would push their sleeping rolls close to the fire and talk until the early morning hours. It was during one of those nights, with the wind howling outside and the fire crackling low, that things finally shifted between them. They had been talking about childhood memories, swapping stories of minor rebellions and small adventures, when Kreshka suddenly fell silent. "What is wrong?" Xavier asked. "Nothing is wrong, that is the problem." She turned to look at him, her face painted in firelight and shadow. "I have never been this happy, Xavier, not in my entire life, and it terrifies me because I do not know how to keep it. Everything I have ever cared about has been taken away or destroyed. I am waiting for that to happen again." "It will not," Xavier said, reaching out to take her hand. "You cannot promise that." "No, but I can promise to fight like hell to prevent it." He shifted closer, his heart hammering. "Kreshka, I need to tell you something. I have been trying to find the right moment, but I do not think there is ever going to be a perfect time, so I am just going to say it. I have fallen in love with you. Completely, irreversibly, probably a terrible idea in love with you. And if that frightens you or you do not feel the same way, I understand, but I needed you to know." For a long moment, Kreshka simply stared at him. Then she laughed, but it was a warm sound, full of relief and joy. "You foolish, wonderful man. Did you really not know that I have been in love with you for weeks now? Why do you think I have been so terrified? You love me. Of course I love you. You saved my life and then gave me a home and showed me that not all humans are enemies. You made me laugh and made me think and made me want to be better than I was." She squeezed his hand. "How could I not love you?" Xavier kissed her then, a clumsy and wonderful collision that tasted like joy and wood smoke. Kreshka kissed him back with a fierceness that spoke of all her warrior training turned toward something tender, and when they finally broke apart they were both breathing hard. "So what do we do now?" Kreshka asked, her forehead resting against his. "We figure it out together. We keep building this life we have started. We deal with whatever comes." Xavier smiled. "And we do it while being hopelessly in love with each other. I can work with that plan." They fell asleep curled together that night, and when Xavier woke in the morning with Kreshka's warmth beside him, he felt a peace he had never known before. Spring came slowly, melting the snow and revealing the muddy earth beneath. Xavier and Kreshka began planning the year's planting, arguing amiably about how much space to dedicate to wheat versus vegetables. They had just finished breakfast one morning when riders appeared on the road, and Xavier felt his brief peace shatter. There were 5 of them, garrison soldiers led by the same young man who had come searching for Kreshka the previous year. They rode up to the farmhouse with hands on their sword hilts, and Xavier stepped outside to meet them with Kreshka at his side. "Xavier Brennan," the lead soldier said. "I am here on orders from Captain Marcus. We have received multiple reports that you are harboring the orc raider we were searching for last summer. Her name is Kreshka, and she is not a raider. She is a person who lives and works here." Xavier kept his voice level. "She has committed no crimes on my land or in this territory since she arrived. She killed 2 soldiers during her escape from our custody. That is crime enough." The soldier dismounted, his hand resting on his sword. "I am authorized to take her into custody by force if necessary." "That will not be necessary," Kreshka said, stepping forward. "I will go with you willingly if you give me your word that Xavier will not be charged with any crime." "No," Xavier said sharply. "You are not going anywhere with them." "Xavier, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. You are not a raider anymore. You have done nothing to deserve execution, which is what they are offering." He turned to the soldiers. "She acted in self-defense when escaping capture. She has harmed no one since. She has paid whatever debt she might owe." "That is not how military justice works," the soldier said. "Now step aside or I will be forced to arrest you as well for obstruction." Xavier did not move. "Then I suppose you will have to arrest me." The soldier looked frustrated and tired. "Brennan, I do not want to do this. But I have my orders. And I have my conscience. Try to take her and you will have to go through me first." The soldiers exchanged glances, clearly not eager to fight a fellow veteran over an orc. Into the tense silence, a new voice called out, "Perhaps we can find another solution." An older man was riding up the path, dressed in civilian clothes but carrying himself with unmistakable authority. He had silver hair and sharp blue eyes, and Xavier recognized him after a moment as Commander Davis, the retired garrison leader who now served on the regional council. "Commander," the young soldier said, saluting. "Sir, we have orders. I know what your orders are, Lieutenant. I also know that rigid application of military law is not always the wisest course." Commander Davis dismounted and approached, his eyes moving between Xavier and Kreshka. "I have been hearing interesting things about you too. Thought I would come see for myself what was happening out here." "With respect, Commander, this is my land and my business," Xavier said. "And with respect to you, Brennan, what happens between humans and orcs affects more than just the individuals involved. We are trying to maintain peace in these territories. Having a known raider living freely on a human farm complicates that." Davis studied Kreshka. "Tell me, why did you raid that supply convoy?" Kreshka met his gaze steadily. "My clan was starving. Your people had pushed us out of our traditional hunting grounds. We needed supplies to survive the winter. So you stole from us." "Yes, and I killed men who tried to stop me." "I will not lie about that or apologize for trying to keep my people alive." She paused. "But I have also learned since coming here that survival does not have to mean constant warfare. Xavier showed me that a different kind of life is possible, one where humans and orcs are not enemies. I want that life. I want to build something instead of always destroying." Commander Davis was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Xavier Brennan, you served with distinction in the border campaigns. Your record is exemplary. Multiple commendations for bravery and for minimizing civilian casualties even when it put you at risk." He turned back to Kreshka. "And you, Kreshka of the Broken Blade clan, are apparently the first orc in recent memory to choose peace over violence when given the option. That is noteworthy." "What is your point, Commander?" the lieutenant asked. "My point is that perhaps we are looking at an opportunity rather than a problem." Davis clasped his hands behind his back. The regional council has been discussing ways to establish better relations with the orc clans. Most of the proposals involve complicated negotiations and likely a great deal of bloodshed before any progress is made. But what if we had a living example of human-orc cooperation? A demonstration that our peoples can coexist peacefully? Xavier felt hope flutter cautiously in his chest. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting that we allow Kreshka to remain here under a probationary status. She would be required to check in with the garrison monthly and agree to assist with any future diplomatic efforts toward her people. In return, she would be granted legal residence and protection under our laws. Davis looked at the lieutenant. I have the authority to make this arrangement, and I am making it. Your orders are now to return to the garrison and report that the matter has been resolved peacefully. The lieutenant looked like he wanted to argue, but he was clearly not willing to defy a direct order from the commander. Yes, sir. As you say, sir. He remounted and gestured to his men. Let us move out. They rode away, and Xavier felt the tension drain out of him so quickly he nearly staggered. Kreshka caught his arm, steadying him, and he turned to Commander Davis with genuine gratitude. Thank you. You did not have to do that. No, I did not, but I am old enough to recognize when rigid adherence to rules does more harm than good. And I am hopeful enough to believe that maybe you too can show us a better way forward. Davis prepared to remount. Do not make me regret this decision, Brennan. We will not, sir. After the commander rode away, Xavier and Kreshka stood together in the morning sunlight, hardly daring to believe what had just happened. We can stay, Kreshka said wonderingly. We can actually stay together. We can, Xavier confirmed, and he pulled her into a tight embrace. I told you we would figure it out. You and your foolish optimism. It worked, did it not? She laughed and kissed him, and for the first time in his life, Xavier felt like all the pieces of his world had finally aligned. The spring planting went well, and with Kreshka's strength and Xavier's knowledge, they were able to expand the cultivated area significantly. Word of Commander Davis's arrangement spread through the region, bringing both supporters and critics. Some people made a point of stopping by the farm to express their approval, while others sent angry letters or shouted insults when Xavier came to town. He bore both with as much grace as he could manage, refusing to be baited into anger. Let them rant, he told Kreshka after a particularly unpleasant trip to Milford. They will either come around or they will not. We cannot control that. It bothers you, though, I can see it. Of course it bothers me. I am not made of stone, but it bothers me less than the alternative would. He set down his packages and pulled her close. I would rather have you and the criticism than neither. Smooth talker. I have my moments. That summer, 3 more orcs appeared at the farm. They came at dawn, moving cautiously up the path with weapons sheathed but visible. Xavier spotted them from the barn and went to meet them with Kreshka at his side. She tensed when she saw them, her hand moving unconsciously toward the knife she kept at her belt. Those are clan colors, she said quietly. Broken blade. The leader of the small group was a large male orc with scars across his face and arms. He stopped a respectful distance away and inclined his head to Kreshka. Kreshka, daughter of Marga, he said in heavily accented human tongue. I am Drakgar, sent by the chieftain. We have heard strange stories about you living among humans. We came to see if they are true. They are true, Kreshka said, straightening her shoulders. I live here with Xavier. We work this farm together. Drakgar's eyes moved to Xavier, assessing. And you, human. You keep our kinswoman as a slave. I keep her as a partner, Xavier said firmly. She is free to leave whenever she chooses. She stays because she wants to. This is truth, Drakgar asked Kreshka. It is truth. Xavier saved my life and gave me a home. More than that, He showed me there is another way to live beyond constant raiding and warfare. I am happier here than I ever was with the clan." Kreshka paused. "I know that likely marks me as a traitor in the chieftain's eyes." "The chieftain's eyes see many things," Drakkar said carefully. "Our people are struggling. Each year the humans push us further into the Badlands. Each year more of our young die in pointless raids. Some of the elders are saying we need to find a new path, but no one knows what that path looks like." He looked around at the farm, taking in the fields and the sturdy buildings. "Until now, perhaps." "What are you saying?" Kreshka asked. "I am saying the chieftain sent me to see if the stories are true and to learn whether this human can be trusted. If he can, there may be room for talking. For finding ways for our peoples to coexist as you and he have done." Drakkar's expression softened slightly. "Your mother misses you, by the way. She wanted me to tell you that." Kreshka's eyes shimmered with sudden tears. "She did?" "Yes. She has been arguing for the clan to seek peace for months now. Your choosing to stay with this human has given her words more weight." Drakkar turned to Xavier. "So, human called Xavier, can you be trusted?" Xavier met his gaze steadily. "I can promise to treat your people fairly and honestly. I can promise to never raise arms against orcs who come in peace. I can promise to do whatever I can to help bridge the gap between our peoples. Beyond that, you will have to judge my trustworthiness by my actions over time." Drakkar was silent for a moment, then he smiled, showing his tusks. "That is a good answer, better than the pretty lies I expected." He looked at Kreshka. "You have chosen well, kinswoman. May your path be blessed." "And yours," Kreshka said, her voice thick with emotion. The three orcs departed as quietly as they had arrived, and Xavier found himself sitting down heavily on the porch steps as the weight of what had just happened settled over him. "That was significant," he said. "Very significant," Kreshka agreed, sitting beside him. "If the clan is truly considering peace, it could change everything." "No pressure then." She laughed and leaned against his shoulder. "We just have to keep doing what we have been doing, living our lives, proving it is possible. The rest will follow or it will not." "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. Not easy, but simple." Over the following year, more orcs came to visit the farm. Some were emissaries from Kreshka's clan. Others were curious individuals from other clans who had heard the stories. Xavier welcomed them all with cautious openness, offering food and conversation. Some meetings went well. Others ended in arguments or standoffs. But slowly, gradually, relationships began to form. Trust began to build. Commander Davis visited regularly to monitor the situation, and he began bringing members of the regional council with him. Talks started happening at Xavier's farmhouse, awkward and stilted at first, but growing more productive over time. Agreements were hammered out regarding territory boundaries and trade possibilities. It was slow work, frustrating and delicate, but it was work that mattered. Through it all, Xavier and Kreshka's relationship deepened and strengthened. They learned each other's moods and habits, discovered how to navigate disagreements, built a partnership that felt unshakable. On a warm evening in late summer, 2 years after Kreshka had first collapsed in his wheat field, Xavier took her hand and led her out to the spot where they had met. "I have been thinking," he said as they stood looking out over the golden fields. "That is usually dangerous," Kreshka said, but she was smiling. "I want to marry you, properly, with witnesses and vows and everything that makes it official." Xavier pulled a simple ring from his pocket, a band of silver he had commissioned from the blacksmith in Milford. "I know it is complicated. I know we will face opposition, but I want the world to know that you are my partner in every sense of the word. Will you marry me?" Kreshka took the ring with shaking hands, tears streaming down her green cheeks. "Yes, yes, you ridiculous, wonderful man. Of course I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her as the sun set over their land, painting everything gold and crimson and perfect. The wedding was held a month later, in the early autumn when the weather was mild and beautiful. Commander Davis served as officiant, using his authority as a regional councilman to make the marriage legally binding. Kreshka's mother Marga came, along with a delegation from the Broken Blade clan. Xavier's sister made the long journey from the southern provinces, bringing her husband and children. Neighbors from the surrounding farms attended, some enthusiastically and others clearly just out of curiosity. It was an odd mix of people, humans and orcs standing together in Xavier's wheat field, but it felt right. Xavier wore his best clothes and Kreshka wore a dress she had made herself, dyed a deep green that brought out her eyes. When they spoke their vows, promising to love and support each other through whatever came, there was not a dry eye in the assembled crowd. "I never thought I would see this day," Marga said during the celebration afterward, speaking to Xavier while Kreshka was occupied greeting guests. "An orc and a human, married with both their people's blessing. You have done something remarkable here, Xavier Brennan." "We did it together," Xavier said. "Your daughter is the bravest person I know. I am just trying to be worthy of her." "You are worthy," Marga said firmly. "You saved her life and gave her a new path. My people will remember that." As the celebration continued into the evening, with humans and orcs eating and drinking and even dancing together, Xavier stood with his wife and marveled at what they had built. It was not perfect. There were still tensions and prejudices on both sides. There would be setbacks and challenges ahead. But looking around at the gathered crowd, seeing the tentative friendships forming and the barriers beginning to break down, he felt a hope he had not known was possible. "What are you thinking?" Kreshka asked, slipping her hand into his. "I am thinking about the day you collapsed in my field," Xavier said. "How terrified I was to make the choice to help you, how certain I was that it would lead to disaster. And I am grateful every day that I made that choice anyway. That you trusted me enough to stay, that we were both brave enough or foolish enough to try." He turned to face her fully. "You asked me once if mercy was weakness. I have our answer now." "What is it?" "Mercy is strength. It is choosing compassion when fear tells you to choose violence. It is building bridges when everyone else is building walls. It is the hardest and most important work anyone can do." Xavier kissed her gently. "Thank you for teaching me that." "Thank you for teaching me that happiness is possible," Kreshka said, "that I do not have to be a warrior forever. That there is room in this world for an orc and a human to build a life together." They stayed there as the stars came out, surrounded by the sounds of celebration, and Xavier knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The story of an orc woman who asked to be buried on a farmer's land had become instead the story of two people who chose love over fear, connection over division, and hope over despair. It was not the ending either of them could have predicted, but it was the one they had created together, and it was more beautiful than anything Xavier could have imagined. The farm thrived in the years that followed. With techniques learned from both human and orc traditions, Xavier and Kreshka developed new farming methods that proved remarkably effective. They expanded their operation, bringing on both human and orc laborers, creating the region's first truly integrated workforce. It was not always smooth. There were fights and misunderstandings and moments when everything seemed on the verge of falling apart. But they worked through each crisis with patience and determination, proving again and again that cooperation was possible. Commander Davis's arrangement evolved into a formal diplomatic program, with Xavier and Kreshka's farm serving as a neutral meeting ground for ongoing negotiations between human settlements and orc clans. Treaties were signed at their kitchen table, Trade agreements were hammered out in their barn. Young orcs and humans began training together in their fields, learning each other's languages and customs. What had started as one farmer's choice to show mercy to a wounded orc grew into a movement that changed the region. On a clear spring morning, 5 years after their wedding, Xavier and Kreshka stood on the hill overlooking their expanded farm and watched the sun rise over what had become a small community. Human and orc families lived and worked together now, their children playing in the fields without the burden of ancient hatreds. It was not perfect. There were still those on both sides who rejected the idea of peace, who clung to old prejudices and fears. But more and more people were choosing a different path, inspired by the example of an orc woman and a human farmer who had dared to imagine something better. "You ever think about that day?" Kreshka asked, her hand resting on her swollen belly. Their first child would arrive with the summer, a baby that would be something entirely new in the world. "When I asked you to bury me on your land, I think about it all the time," Xavier admitted. "How close we came to a completely different story, how one choice changed everything." "I was so certain I was going to die," Kreshka said quietly. "I had given up. All I wanted was to not end as a trophy for the humans who killed my brothers. And then you gave me something I never expected." "What was that?" "A reason to live. A future worth fighting for." She turned to face him, her amber eyes bright with love and joy. "You gave me a home, Xavier. You gave me hope. You gave me everything." He pulled her close, careful of her belly, and kissed her forehead. "You gave me the same. I was so lonely before you came, going through the motions of life without really living. You changed that. You made me believe that the world could be better, that I could be part of making it better." Their child was born on the summer solstice, a healthy baby boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's green-tinted skin. They named him Marcus, after the commander who had given them their chance, and when word spread through the region about the birth, gifts arrived from both human and orc families. It was a moment of celebration that transcended old boundaries, a symbol of the new world being born. Xavier held his son and looked at Kreshka, who was tired but radiant, and felt his heart overflow with gratitude. The farm that had been his refuge from war had become the foundation for peace. The orc woman who had collapsed in his field dying had become his wife, his partner, his greatest love. The choice he had made to show mercy instead of fear had created ripples that spread far beyond anything he could have anticipated. "If I die," Kreshka had said, "bury me on your land." But she had not died. Instead, she had lived, and together they had built something beautiful and lasting on that land. They had proven that the cycles of hatred and violence could be broken by people brave enough to choose differently. They had shown that love could bridge any divide, that understanding could replace fear, that the future did not have to repeat the mistakes of the past. As Xavier stood with his family in the home they had created together, surrounded by the community they had helped build, he knew that this was what peace looked like. Not the absence of conflict, but the daily choice to see the humanity in others, even those who seemed most different. The choice to offer mercy, to extend trust, to believe that change was possible. It was hard work, requiring constant effort and renewal. But it was the most important work in the world. "I love you," he told Kreshka, the words as true now as they had been the first time he spoke them. "I love you too," she said. And in that moment, holding their child between them with the sun streaming through the windows, everything was exactly as it should be. The story of an orc woman who arrived dying and a farmer who chose compassion had become legend in the region, inspiring others to question old hatreds and seek new ways forward. But to Xavier and Kreshka, it was simply their life, the everyday miracle of choosing each other again and again. And if that choice had helped change the world, well, that was simply what happened when people decided love was stronger than fear. They would face challenges still. There would be setbacks and opposition and moments of doubt. But they would face them together, as they had faced everything since that morning when Kreshka collapsed in the wheat field, and Xavier made the choice to help instead of harm. That choice had saved her life, but it had also saved his, pulling him out of lonely isolation and giving him purpose beyond mere survival. Now, watching his son sleep peacefully in his arms, seeing the hope and joy in his wife's eyes, surrounded by the community they had built, and the peace they had fostered, Xavier Brennan knew with absolute certainty that he would make that same choice again every single time. Because mercy was not weakness, love was not foolishness, and believing in the possibility of a better world was not naive optimism, but the most powerful force for change that existed. The sun continued its path across the sky, lighting up the fields where humans and orcs worked side by side, where children of both races played together without fear, where the future was being planted seed by seed, choice by choice, act of kindness by act of kindness. And in the farmhouse that had started it all, a family rested together, proof that the impossible could become real if people were brave enough to try. This was their happy ending, but it was also their beginning, the foundation for everything still to come. And as Kreshka fell asleep with her hand in Xavier's, and their son nestled between them, the last thing she thought was that she had asked to be buried on his land, but instead had found a way to live on it, to thrive on it, to build a legacy of love and hope that would outlast them both. It was, she thought, a much better outcome than dying could ever have been.